All right, so the material we have today is some really passionate commentary from a political figure. It's covering a huge range of very charged legal and political issues, everything from use of force to the draft law, and even limiting the Supreme Court's power.
Yeah, and the conviction in the voice is just undeniable. You can hear this is a speaker who is, fiercely committed to her mandate. That fire is definitely the material's greatest strength.
Absolutely. So let's dive right in. The first area, and I think it's the most critical, is structure and flow.
Okay.
The core issue is that the presentation's effectiveness is really hampered by the rapid transition between these distinct, high-stakes subjects. It creates this kind of argumentative fragmentation.
That's a good way to put it. It's almost like argumentative whiplash.
Yes.
It's not just the number of topics, but the sequence. You go from this horrifying, visceral incident with the bus driver dragging a child,
Which is just awful.
and then, boom, you're suddenly talking about Haredi protests and whether Naturi Karta can block roads.
And then right from there into the super technical details of the conscription law, the draft law.
And then another jump into judicial reform and the override clause. It's just a lot, very fast.
Exactly. The swiftness of those pivots is the tactical mistake here. I mean, all these points, they do share a common thread, right? Perceived double standards, establishment bias.
Sure, they're related thematic.
But because there are no clear structural bridges, the whole argument just feels reactive. It doesn't build on itself.
I think the speaker loses so much political currency right at the start. That first story about the driver is so emotional, so powerful.
It is.
It taps into real fears about safety, about law and order. But by jumping from that straight into a procedural debate about protest rights, you don't give that emotion time to land. You don't solidify the core point.
I see what you're saying. You're saying you need to leverage that initial emotion.
Yes.
So the suggestion then is to group topics more logically to really maximize that thematic resonance.
Right. And you have to use clear signposts. Give the listener a roadmap. You need to explicitly tie these different policy outcomes back to a unifying metaphor.
Like the need to protect the mandate of the majority or something like that?
Or selective enforcement of the law. Something that holds it all together.
Okay, so let's get concrete. How do you build that bridge?
Well, after you finish with the driver's incident and the speaker's point about the police quickly ruling out terrorism.
Which her base sees as a huge failure of the system.
Exactly. So you take that feeling of systemic failure and you link it directly to the need for legislative accountability. That becomes your natural lead-in to the whole discussion about judicial power.
Okay, so instead of judicial reform being this separate ideological battle over here,
You frame it as an urgent, pragmatic necessity to fix the policy failures you just outlined.
and that's where the draft law discussion comes in perfectly. The speaker notes that if they don't pass a mitigating law, they'll simply receive another high court ruling on their heads.
That's the key. That fear of judicial intervention. That should be the primary reason why you need structural reform, like amending a basic law.
So you're making the case that reform is a defensive move.
It's a defensive move needed to implement policy that the majority voted for. It keeps the argument focused instead of drifting back to, the internal politics of Nutre Carta.
So the logic becomes, here's a necessary policy, the draft law. It's being blocked by an interventionist judiciary. Therefore, the only way for the government to fulfill its mandate is through systemic reform like the override clause.
Yes, the structure follows the logic. It transforms the speech from what feels like a list of grievances into a single cohesive agenda.
I like that. It's about removing barriers to governance.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to our second point. This one is about completeness and focus. The strategic use of comparative examples, which, let's be honest, often comes across as whataboutism.
It does.
It risks deflecting attention away from the core policy solution the speaker's actually trying to advocate for.
And this happens a lot in the material. It's a powerful political tool, I get it, but it can be a really weak policy tool.
Right, like asking, where are the Arabs who are drafted, or pointing to tens of thousands in Tel Aviv who aren't serving as a defense for the Haredi contribution.
We also see it with the protests. The argument that the left was allowed to block the Ayalon highway is used to justify Haredi groups blocking roads elsewhere.
And look, these comparisons are effective at highlighting what the speaker sees as hypocrisy or selective enforcement. That's a legitimate point to make.
But they function as a defense mechanism. They don't really move the policy forward. It sounds like you're trying to deflect responsibility.
I agree completely. By focusing so hard on what other groups are supposedly failing to do, the central proposal, the new draft law, actually sounds weaker.
It does. It sounds less like a holistic, national solution to burden sharing and more like you're just stuck in a political food fight.
Where everyone is just as bad as everyone else.
Right. So the suggestion here has to be shifting that rhetoric. Move from comparison as deflection to comparison as evidence.
Evidence for what, exactly?
Evidence for the need for universal, principled policy enforcement.
So every time you mention another group, it has to serve the purpose of strengthening your own proposal for change. It has to lead to the solution, not away from it.
Exactly. Let's make that concrete.
Okay.
Instead of using non-conscripts in Tel Aviv as a rhetorical shield for the Haredim, propose a government decision that explicitly addresses all non-conscripted sectors.
Secular, Arab, Haredi, everyone.
Everyone. Create a unified, logical approach to recruitment based on what the military actually says it needs.
That's a huge shift. It immediately elevates the argument from a narrow, sectarian defense to a call for responsible national governance.
It changes the question from, why are you picking on us, to, here is our comprehensive plan for everybody.
And the same logic would apply to the protest argument.
It has to. The argument can't just be, if they can do it, so can we. That's purely reactive.
It needs to become a call for uniform legal standards. So you'd say something like, the precedent set by allowing the blocking of Ayalon must lead to one of two things.
Either universal enforcement against all road closures,
Or a new law that clearly defines what is and isn't permissible protest. The key is that enforcement can't be selective.
and that's crucial because the speaker specifically mentions that concern, the fear of different treatment when a person wears black or is Ethiopian or is Haredi.
So by leaning into that principle that the law must apply equally to everyone, the speaker takes a much stronger policy-focused position. It goes beyond just complaining about hypocrisy.
And it shows you're taking ownership of the problem of enforcement, which is a much more powerful stance. It's about building durable national policy, not just winning a rhetorical point.
Right. A very strong shift. Okay. Our third area of critique is about tone and style. The highly personalized, aggressive attacks on political rivals, I think, risk alienating the very audience the speaker needs. Potential allies, undecideds, people who might otherwise support the agenda.
This is a tricky one. I'm genuinely curious about the political calculation here. We see these very intense personal attacks.
The one against Minister Yariv Levin stands out.
It does. The speaker says she will not descend to that level, but then immediately follows up with these sharp critiques about his failure after failure after failure.
Basically saying he's failed at his job, at leading the judicial reform.
And then there's the critique of the state prosecutor, Mayara, suggesting her 60-page document proves she has nothing to write and accusing her office of using rogue software.
That's a lot.
It is, and, attacking the prosecution is almost expected from her base. It's seen as defending the right-wing project. But does attacking a coalition partner, Levin, so personally undermine the goal of actually passing laws?
That's the strategic risk, isn't it? This intensely personal rhetoric, it conveys passion, it conveys loyalty. She says, my home is only my home.
Here is where I am elected by the public.
Right. But it distracts from the substantial policy points. The focus shifts from the importance of the cause, implementing the coalition's mandate, to the pettiness of the feud.
So the suggestion has to be to maintain the conviction, keep that fire, but elevate the critique. Move it from personal character to policy necessity.
From character assassination to strategic disappointment.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. You need to frame these disputes with colleagues as issues of coalition alignment, of the discipline needed to get things done.
So, if we apply that to the Levin critique, instead of a direct personal attack, which only creates resentment,
you reframe it around unity and the government's strategic imperative.
You could say something like, the primary obligation of our 68 mandates is to fill the government's days with legislative action, not engage in media skirmishes.
That's good.
This government owes it to the nation to focus and pass the draft law and the necessary judicial corrections.
That's much more effective leadership language. It still demands action, but it directs the fire outwards, at the opposition, not inwards at a colleague.
It holds them accountable without totally burning the bridge.
And for the state prosecutor, How do you handle that? Same principle. When discussing that 60-page document about Minister Ben-Gvir, the focus has to be solely on the perceived legal overreach, the threat to the separation of powers.
Not on the length of the document.
Definitely not on the length of the document. The speaker needs to emphasize that she is defending the office of the Minister for National Security, not just the man himself.
The material is at its strongest when it's about these high-level constitutional principles. So they should argue that the real question is whether the prosecution is attacking the office or the man.
Exactly. The core issue is the perceived judicial attack on an elected minister's ability to carry out policy. That shifts the conversation away from professional insults about page counts and puts it squarely on the integrity of the democratic process.
By doing that, the speaker remains the advocate for the entire right-wing project, not just a participant in a personal fight.
It shows leadership, a commitment to the movement's success over a personal political win.
So, to wrap up, we've covered the three most significant opportunities here. The actionable suggestions were, first, to improve the argumentative structure by grouping related topics.
Right. Moving from a list of grievances to a clear policy solution and using strong signposting to guide the listener.
Second, we focused on integrating those comparative arguments into comprehensive policy solutions.
Shifting the rhetoric from whataboutism as a defense to using those comparisons as concrete evidence that demands universal, unified policy.
And finally, elevating the tone, focusing on principle and policy shortcomings instead of descending into those highly personalized attacks.
The material's conviction is already its greatest asset. That energy is palpable. Implementing these revisions will just help ensure that the fiery passion translates into the most persuasive power possible.
Maximizing the potential of that political mandate.
Exactly.
We look forward to seeing the refined material. Please feel free to submit your improved work back to us for a follow-up.